You are standing in the ruins of Persepolis in 330 BCE, watching smoke rise from the greatest palace complex the ancient world has ever known. The flames aren't random destruction from conquering soldiers. They're the calculated finale to a systematic campaign that transformed the wives and daughters of Persian nobility from queens and princesses into trophies in Alexander's grand design for empire. What you're about to discover challenges every heroic narrative you've heard about Alexander the Great. This isn't the story of military genius or cultural fusion found in history textbooks. This is the documented account of how one man's ambition created a machine of political marriage and forced assimilation that operated across 3 continents for over a decade. Before we examine what really happened when Alexander encountered the families of his enemies, if you find these deeper investigations into ancient history compelling, consider subscribing. It genuinely helps us uncover more forgotten stories that textbooks often sanitize or ignore entirely. Now let's explore what Alexander's treatment of enemy wives reveals about the true nature of ancient conquest, and why modern historians have struggled to address these uncomfortable truths. The year is 334 BCE. Alexander has just crossed the Hellespont with 35,000 men, beginning what would become the most extensive military campaign in ancient history. But Alexander's strategy for conquest went far beyond battlefield victories. He understood that controlling territory meant controlling the people who lived there, and controlling people meant controlling their most intimate relationships, their family structures, their cultural identity. When Alexander defeated Darius III at the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, he didn't just capture the Persian king's treasury and military equipment. He captured something far more valuable for his long-term strategy. Darius's wife Statera, his mother Sisygambis, his daughters, and his entire royal household fell into Alexander's hands. What happened next reveals the calculated precision with which Alexander approached the families of his enemies. Ancient sources, including Arrian, Plutarch, and the document that Alexander treated captured Persian royal women with apparent respect and honor. But this wasn't mercy or cultural sensitivity. It was political theater designed to serve multiple strategic purposes simultaneously. By treating Darius's family well, Alexander sent a message to other Persian nobles that surrender might preserve their families' lives and status. Simultaneously, he demonstrated to his own men that he possessed the ultimate prizes of Persian civilization. The psychological warfare embedded in this approach was devastatingly effective. Darius couldn't simply retreat and regroup for another battle. His wife, his children, his mother remained hostages in Alexander's camp. Every strategic decision the Persian king made had to account for the safety of his family members who were completely at Alexander's mercy. The capture transformed military conflict into personal anguish, making rational strategic thinking nearly impossible for the enemy commander. But Alexander's treatment of enemy wives extended far beyond the royal household of Darius. As his army moved through the Persian Empire, a pattern emerged that would define his approach to conquest for the remainder of his campaign. Local governors, military commanders, and regional nobles who resisted Alexander's advance discovered that defeat meant not just loss of territory or political position. It meant their families became instruments of Alexander's imperial policy. The mass wedding at Susa in 324 BCE represents perhaps the most systematic example of how Alexander weaponized marriage for political control. Alexander ordered 80 of his senior officers to marry Persian noblewomen in a single ceremony. This wasn't romantic diplomacy or cultural exchange. These marriages were political tools designed to create hybrid ruling class, loyal to Alexander, while ensuring that Persian aristocratic families remained tied to Macedonian interests through their daughters. The logistics of arranging these marriages reveal the industrial scale of Alexander's approach to controlling enemy families. Persian noblewomen were evaluated not for their personal qualities or preferences, but for their political connections and potential to cement alliances. Greek and Macedonian officers, received wives based on strategic calculations about regional control and administrative efficiency. The ceremony itself was conducted according to Persian customs, but the underlying purpose was purely Macedonian imperial policy. Archaeological evidence from sites across the former Persian Empire supports written accounts of these systematic marriage arrangements. Excavations at administrative centers have uncovered correspondence discussing the placement of Persian wives with Macedonian officers, suggesting a bureaucratic system that tracked these relationships like military assets. Palace complexes show evidence of separate quarters designed to house multiple wives from different cultural backgrounds, indicating that polygamous arrangements became standard practice among Alexander's senior commanders. The women caught in these arrangements faced impossible choices that reveal the human cost of Alexander's imperial ambitions. Refusing marriage to a Macedonian officer might mean death or slavery for themselves and their remaining family members. Accepting meant permanent separation from their cultural identity, their religion, their homeland. Many of these women never saw their families again, transported hundreds of miles from their birthplaces to serve as political cement in Alexander's expanding empire. Contemporary accounts describe elaborate ceremonies where Persian wives were required to adopt Macedonian customs, dress, and religious practices, while their Macedonian husbands learned Persian languages and administrative techniques. But these cultural exchanges weren't mutual respect or genuine fusion. They were calculated policies designed to create administrative efficiency while maintaining clear hierarchies of power. The Persian wives provided local knowledge and legitimacy. The Macedonian husbands provided military authority and direct connection to Alexander's central government. The children born from these unions face particularly complex circumstances that reveal the long-term implications of Alexander's policies. They were raised as Macedonians, but retained Persian bloodlines that gave them claims to local authority. Alexander intended these mixed heritage children to serve as future administrators who could bridge cultural gaps while remaining loyal to his imperial system. The policy created a generation of individuals whose very existence depended on maintaining Alexander's political structure. But resistance to these marriage policies reveals that not all enemy wives accepted their circumstances passively. Historical sources document several cases of Persian noblewomen who attempted to poison their Macedonian husbands, organized escape attempts, or sent secret communications to Persian resistance movements. These acts of defiance were met with systematic punishments designed to terrorize other wives into compliance and demonstrate the consequences of challenging Alexander's authority. The broader implications of Alexander's approach to enemy wives extended throughout his entire empire, creating precedents that would influence imperial policy for centuries. Regional governors across the empire began implementing similar strategies, understanding that controlling the families of local elites provided more effective governance than military occupation alone. The practice spread from Persia into Egypt, Bactria, and India as Alexander's forces encountered new enemies and absorbed their territories. The systematic nature of these policies becomes clear when examining Alexander's treatment of Barsine, the widow of Memnon of Rhodes, one of Darius's most capable generals. After Memnon's death, Barsine didn't simply become another captive. Alexander took her as his own mistress, a relationship that produced a son named Heracles. But this wasn't romantic attraction or personal choice. Barsine possessed extensive knowledge of Persian military networks, diplomatic relationships, and regional politics that made her invaluable for intelligence purposes. The relationship with Barsine reveals how Alexander transformed intimate partnerships into espionage operations. Through her connections, Alexander gained access to information about Persian resistance movements, potential rebellion plots, and the loyalty of various regional commanders. Barsine's position as his mistress provided cover for these intelligence activities, while sending clear messages to other Persian nobles about the benefits of cooperation versus the consequences of continued resistance. When Alexander's forces reached Sogdiana in Central Asia, his encounter with Roxana, daughter of the Bactrian nobleman Oxyates, followed a similar pattern despite later romanticized accounts. Oxyates had organized fierce resistance against Macedonian forces from his mountain fortress. Alexander's marriage to Roxana in 327 BCE wasn't love at first sight, as popular histories suggest. It was a calculated political maneuver designed to neutralize Oxyates' rebellion by incorporating his family into Alexander's imperial structure. The wedding ceremony itself demonstrates the systematic approach Alexander brought to these arrangements. The ritual combined Macedonian and local customs, creating a template that would be replicated throughout the empire. Roxana received honors appropriate to a queen, but her father Oxyates was required to provide detailed intelligence about remaining resistance networks in the region. The marriage transformed a military enemy into a political ally, while ensuring that Roxana's family remained invested in Alexander's continued success. Archaeological excavations at sites associated with these political marriages have revealed disturbing evidence of the conditions these women faced. Residential quarters show signs of heavy security measures, including reinforced doors, barred windows, and separate guard positions. These weren't palaces designed for honored guests. They were sophisticated detention facilities that maintained the appearance of respectful treatment while ensuring complete control over the occupants. Personal items recovered from these sites tell stories of cultural destruction and forced assimilation. Persian religious artifacts show evidence of deliberate damage or modification to remove traditional symbols. Clothing fragments reveal attempts to blend Persian and Macedonian styles in ways that eliminated distinctive cultural markers. Even jewelry and cosmetic implements show signs of alteration designed to create hybrid identities that served Alexander's political purposes rather than reflecting genuine cultural fusion. The documentation systems Alexander's administration used to track these marriages reveal the bureaucratic sophistication behind what appeared to be personal relationships. Clay tablets recovered from administrative centers contain detailed records of which Persian women were assigned to which Macedonian officers, their family connections, their potential political value, and their compliance with imperial policies. These records treat human beings like strategic assets, cataloging their usefulness for maintaining regional control. The psychological impact on the women themselves emerges from fragments of personal correspondence that survived in various archaeological contexts. Letters written in Persian and hidden in household items describe desperate attempts to maintain connections with their original families, religious practices conducted in secret, and coded communications with other Persian wives experiencing similar circumstances. These documents reveal communities of resistance operating within the imperial marriage system. But perhaps most revealing are the records of what happened to wives who attempted to escape or resist their circumstances. Administrative documents describe systematic punishments that went far beyond individual retribution. When one Persian noblewoman attempted to flee her Macedonian husband, not only was she executed, but her entire extended family faced consequences designed to terrorize other wives into compliance. These weren't isolated incidents of cruelty. They were calculated policies designed to maintain control through fear. The scale of these operations becomes clear when examining the logistics required to implement Alexander's marriage policies across his vast empire. Transportation networks were established specifically for moving Persian women to distant locations where they would serve as wives for Macedonian administrators. Supply systems provided resources for wedding ceremonies, household establishment, and ongoing supervision of these relationships. Communication networks ensured that information about compliance and resistance reached central authorities quickly enough to enable immediate responses. The long-term consequences of these policies extended far beyond Alexander's lifetime, creating social and political structures that would influence the region for generations. The children of these forced unions became the ruling class of the Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged after Alexander's death. Their mixed heritage gave them legitimacy with local populations, while their Macedonian connections provided military and political authority. But their existence remained dependent on maintaining the imperial systems that had created their families in the first place. When Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE, the fate of these women and their children revealed the true nature of their circumstances. Many Persian wives were abandoned by their Macedonian husbands who returned to Greece or sought new opportunities in the chaos following Alexander's death. Others were murdered to eliminate potential claims their children might make to political authority. The systematic destruction of these families during the Wars of Succession demonstrates that they had never been genuine marriages or cultural exchanges. The systematic destruction of these families during the Wars of Succession demonstrates that they had never been genuine marriages or cultural exchanges. What emerges from the archaeological record and historical documentation is a picture of calculated dehumanization operating on an imperial scale. Alexander's treatment of enemy wives wasn't the romantic diplomacy portrayed in popular culture. It was systematic political warfare that transformed women into instruments of conquest, their children into hostages, and their families into mechanisms of control. The evidence carved in stone, written in correspondence, and buried in administrative centers tells a story that challenges every heroic narrative about Alexander's legacy. For over a decade, thousands of women disappeared into a machine of forced assimilation that operated with bureaucratic precision while the ancient world celebrated military genius. Their voices were silenced, their identities erased, their humanity reduced to strategic calculations in imperial ledgers. This wasn't ancient romance or cultural fusion. This was organized subjugation that shaped civilizations, reminding us how quickly societies normalize the unthinkable when conquest becomes the ultimate measure of greatness.